A new study out of China is once again generating debate about the ethics of genetic re-engineering, this time involving animals implanted with human genes.
Start this war.
It's a climactic scene from the Planet of the Apes, but this story isn't about that movie or a preview of even the next one, whenever that may be. This story is about real monkeys with real human genes. In a study published last month in the Chinese journal National Science Review, a group of Chinese scientists report that they created a new type of monkey with a human brain gene. The researchers say they implanted the so-called MCPH1 gene into the embryos of 11 transgenic rhesus monkeys. 6 of the monkeys died during the research, but 5 lived. According to the study, the surviving monkeys, quote, exhibited better short-term memory and shorter reaction time compared to other regular monkeys in the sample.
Well, as you know, science and religion have a history. And back in the day before Darwin, every educated person thought life was designed. And it was obvious because, you know, birds have wings and fish have gills and so on, all these things that fit them to their environment. And Darwin proposed this non-intelligent explanation for life. And biology, which was then kind of struggling to become a professional science in its own right, loved it, because now we don't have to ask, you know, the pastors and the ministers for permission to say something about life. We'll just figure it all out on our own. So there's a kind of a professional jealousy. People want biology to be able to be explained in the same way that physics and chemistry can be explained.
Darwin, a lot of theories, a lot of arguments, a lot of science, so to speak. What is Darwinianism? What is that?
Well, Darwin comes a mid-19th century figure. 1859, he published what is arguably his masterpiece, The Origin of Species. And the question that Darwin asked himself was the question that all of the 19th century biologists were asking. What is the nature of life? What is the origin of individual species? How did life emerge from inorganic matter? And what are the dynamic laws that change one species into another, if there is such a thing as a change of species? Don't forget, alchemy promoted a very similar thesis when it said base metals could be transmuted into gold. It was an argument for transmutation of elements. Well, Darwin provided an alchemical explanation for biology. Species could be transformed into other species. Well, how can this come about? We don't see it every day. It comes about because there are small variations within each species, and these variations are seized upon by the mechanism of natural selection, which simply means some survive, some don't survive. Over vast periods of time, these small variations accumulate. They converge on a different structure, and various different structures in turn converge on a new body plan, a new organism, a new species, a new entry in the vast pharmacopoeia of life. That's Darwinism.
But you're now talking about a completely new level. So I want to get to that idea. So at some point somebody says, okay, evolution goes by, we don't call it variations, now it's mutations, and now we can look at mutations. So what is it in the last 20 years that makes it clear that that can't work?
Well, it's our ability to track down helpful changes, helpful mutations in the DNA. As I said earlier, we couldn't do that before. People would see some bacteria grow better in a certain environment, or a bunny rabbit have a different coat color and blend into the snow better. Everybody, I think, has heard of the Human Genome Sequencing Project, where the DNA complement of humans has been deciphered letter by letter by letter by letter. Now people can sequence genomes of brand new organisms, in an afternoon, have their graduate student go into the lab and say, sequence that for me. And so now we can track down these mutations.
Okay, so the big news that enables you to write this devastating book is that it's no longer speculation. We now can look at the actual mutations and determine whether they are helping the organism and how.
Overwhelmingly, the mutations are ones that break things that were already there.
Why is that a problem for Darwinism?
Well, because it shows that Darwin's mechanism is actually powerfully devolutionary rather than evolutionary. It strongly tends to break things, throw them away, like the example I talked about, and that's not going to be something that constructs sophisticated molecular machinery such as we found in the cell.
I feel like what you're saying, though, is that, in other words, what this is leading us to conclude is there are these models that exist. There's a dog, there's a cat, there are these different things, and you're saying that we can have microevolution and we can break the genes, and so we can make this kind of a cat or this kind of a dog, but we can never, because we're not adding genes or whatever, you can never breed a dog that will become a giraffe or a horse. You can never break out of the dog wheel rut, so to speak. Like, it's always going to be some kind of dog.
That's correct.
Many places when one looks at Darwinism, one says, hey, look, this just isn't a scientific theory. It's a collection of anecdotes. Why did the giraffe develop such a long neck? Well, he wanted to reach the trees on the top. Well, how come other animals didn't develop the long neck? Well, they didn't want to reach the trees on the top. How come certain kinds of European eels have to swim across the Atlantic in order to mate? Other kinds of eels are perfectly happy fornicating close to home. Well, it worked for one seal, didn't work for the other. Why aren't women born with tails like cats? Well, women don't seem to need the tails, even though it would make them even more alluring than they are. Why don't cats rule the world, considering they have every reason and every opportunity to do so? Well, they're content being our domestic masters. I mean, the anecdotes pile on interminably, and there's no fundamental leading principle.
They were tested with MRI brain scans and memory functions using colors and block pictures. While the 5 monkeys' brains were not larger than their counterparts, they did develop over a longer period, typical of human brains, particularly that of children. The scientists described their work as the first attempt to experimentally interrogate the genetic basis of the human brain origin using a transgenic monkey model, and it values the use of non-human primates in understanding human unique traits. Translation: to help determine how the human brain developed using a monkey. But some scientists contend that a study involving just 5 monkeys isn't large enough to garner conclusive results, and not everyone is happy about this type of science being performed in the first place. Many scientists contend that genetic re-engineering is a slippery slope ethically. University of Colorado bioethicist Jacqueline Glover, in an interview with the MIT Technology Review, even compared the experiment to Planet of the Apes, saying, quote, "To humanize them is to cause harm."
Take your stinking paw off me, you damn dirty ape!
Now, I suspect there have always been those who claim to be atheists, confidently asserting that there is no God, there is no afterlife, but they have historically been rare, few and far between up until recent times, that even Charles Darwin believed in God, and he believed in an afterlife. Although he considered religion, he said, quote unquote, a tribal survival strategy. Welcome to the tribe. But now we are, I would say, unconvincingly assured by such intellectual luminaries as Stephen Hawking or Richard Dawkins or Sam Harris et al. That are really, they call them the new atheists, which I find quite fascinating. And I say unconvincing because they want to convince us that there is no heaven, there is no hell, there is no afterlife. What you see is what you get, and there's nothing else. Now, one of the things that Paul said, and I think he may have included them in this group, he said, that professing themselves wise, they become fools. That sometimes you can become so focused on one thing that you miss everything. For example, Stephen Hawking, who was one of the most brilliant mathematicians of our generation, when it came to speculating on things outside of mathematics, things that can't be measured by mathematical equations or speculations, made really astounding statement. He says, because there is gravity, the thing that makes the ball go down, not up, because there is gravity, the universe can and will create itself from nothing. Spontaneous creation is the reason why we exist. Now, I know he knows better. Spontaneous creation was first put out there by Aristotle. And it was thoroughly debunked by Francesco Redi in 1664. Nobody in the scientific community believes in spontaneous generation except when they're talking about evolution. That somehow this primordial ooze kind of got together. I don't know, they were hanging out at the ooze bar or something. And all of a sudden they say, hey, let's become a person. And boop, exo-bexo, well, there we are. Well, we know that's ludicrous, so what we have to do is kind of stir in billions and billions and billions of years, because somehow if you just add time, anything is possible. So when we were cooking steaks on Friday night, I said, don't worry how long you keep it on the grill, it'll just get better. Thankfully, my bride did not listen to my advice. But he goes on to say, we are just an advanced breed of monkeys on a minor planet of a very average star. But, and this is probably the most outrageous statement he makes, but we can understand the universe. Really? And then he says, that's what makes us very special. So you're just an ape, but you can understand the universe, and that makes you special.